writers in our writing centers. I'm Marilee Brooks Gillies. I direct the Writing Center at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. And I'm actually in my campus office today, which hasn't happened for months. So kind of a weird thing, but nice. We're going to talk, introduce ourselves briefly, me and Kate, and tell you a little bit about our centers. And then we're hoping that you can think about a couple things that your center's already doing to support grad students and a couple things you'd like to do to get the conversation started, and we'll end up doing some breakout groups. So I'm just going to tell you a few things about my center and how we support grad students at IWCA in our writing center to get us started, and then Kate's going to do the same about her center. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hope that it works. I feel like I should be really good at this now that I'm teaching in Zoom, but you just never know. So here we are supporting graduate writers through things like writing groups, write on-site events, and writing workshops. So these are the kinds of things I'm going to talk about. Of course, there are other ways to support graduate student writers as well. So a little bit of context about my institution. It's right in the center of Indianapolis, so right downtown, which is lovely. And we're at an urban campus so I guess I already said that pretty much. If you know the size of Indianapolis, it's a fairly large city. Like the 12th in the country, always surprised by that. And our campus has just under 30,000 students, and about 8,000 are graduate students or professional students. We do have a law school, we have a med school, as well as many, many graduate programs. Our writing center is housed in the School of Liberal Arts, and it is staffed by undergraduate and graduate consultants across disciplines. Most of our undergraduate consultants are English majors, I will say, and they all work between 10 and 20 hours a week, and they can support any writer. So anyone can come in, undergrad, grad students, staff, faculty, but most we see undergrads. But in the past few years, we've seen more and more grad students, almost comparable to the percentage of grad students on campus. So about 25% of our users are graduate students. And so we can meet with them through things like one-to-one sessions, the heart and soul of writing centers, group sessions on occasion, graduate writing workshops, graduate writing groups, and write on-site programming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those things, and then also a role we have that supports graduate students developing some of this programming with me. So first I have the graduate writing group. So these are multidisciplinary groups. Students can express interest early in the semester and they're placed in a group. Ideally, even though they're multidisciplinary, these will be things that are comparable. So social sciences, we try to get together. Humanities, we try to get together. Hard sciences, we try to get together. Occasionally, that's very difficult. The students in the group, there's usually 3 to 5. We might allow 6 on occasion. But we do want everyone to be able to talk about their writing during the groups fairly frequently. So if there's too many people, you don't get to talk about your own writing quite as often. So each week you look at maybe 2 people's writing. You'll have that writing in advance, be able to read it, and then have kind of a writing center session, but a group session where the writing center facilitator, who's a grad consultant, can help teach people a little bit more about how to provide really productive feedback to one another. But we've also found it's a great place for people to be accountable. So not only are they getting feedback, but they have writing deadlines that really matter, right? And it's also a way to find community. So they get to talk to other grad students. And because these students aren't necessarily in their own programs, they also get to practice being expert in a way that they don't necessarily get to do in conversations with mentors in their own discipline, or even students in their own programs. So these meet for about 2 hours a week, and we have a grad coordinator who oversees them. And these are similar to groups that I used to run when I was a graduate consultant myself at Michigan State University's Writing Center. And the chapter that I have here is in a book that just came out, Graduate Writing Across the Disciplines, if you want to check it out, and other great graduate writing resources there. Another type of programming we've been doing is write on site. And so that's a type of programming where people come and write together. Now, of course, now it's in Zoom. So they just show up like you all did today. And we would have a moment where people would check in, briefly, how's your writing been going? And then move into writing time. But they can also do breakout groups and talk to each other during that write on site time. So just really having time scheduled to write, and then knowing that people are expecting to see you there, even if you don't do a bunch of visiting. can make it kind of more likely you're not going to cover up that writing time with something else, which we all do as faculty members. So it's probably even harder for grad students to develop really good habits around saving and protecting that writing time. So we do hope people return each week, and a lot of people do, but sometimes people can't make it. That's okay. We don't want another site that feels, scary and punitive. So every time they come, it's exciting to see them instead of, where were you last week? And lastly, we have a series of writing workshops. We have not been doing these this semester in the coronavirus pandemic because we haven't decided how well all of these would fit in a Zoom format. We're thinking about it for the spring. Some of these things also can happen in the writing groups, especially as people are sharing out different kinds of concerns or questions they have. It makes a lot of sense. For instance, an early meeting would involve some discussion of planning for your semester and thinking about what your goals are for the group. And so those things can be folded into the other types of programming. The same is true for Write on Site. If a lot of people are sharing similar concerns, they could spend a few minutes talking about some of these things, sharing some of these tools. And so these are just some of the things we do. Obviously, this list could get a lot longer. And it is also dependent on the kind of trends we see and feedback we're getting from participants. But I know that folks are really interested in talking about mentoring networks because sometimes they rely almost entirely on their, thesis or doctoral supervisor and chair, and that's not always super helpful. So kind of letting them know they can get different kinds of support and feedback from everyone, and nobody has just one mentor. And so mentor mapping is a really helpful activity. And also sometimes they haven't really thought about themselves as writers, especially writers that are outside of, fields like rhetoric and writing or communications, where it's more common to think about ourselves as communicators and writers. And so really having them think about their writing process and what things work for them and what things may be getting in their way is a really productive activity for us to do. And having time to explore that and talk to other grad students about it has been something that students always really enjoy. So just a few things. Obviously could talk all day about all of them, but will not. Lastly, at the center, because we're staffed by undergraduate and graduate writers, they're all involved in the making of our programming and the delivery of the programming. So we have a position of a graduate writer coordinator who is involved in promoting the groups, promoting the programming, and working with graduate consultants on training them to be facilitators for our graduate writing groups and supporting them as group facilitators and trends in the groups. And this is also really exciting because it's a partnership where it's funded partly by the Writing Center, partly by the grad school, and partly by the English department, so that it's less expensive for the center. And it is a really good way to be very visible to graduate school and hopefully have nice collaboration there. So if that's something that's possible for your centers, it's something to think about. And then this student also gets to have a lot of hands-on activities and does research in this area, does administrative clerical tasks in this area, and does consulting in this area. So something that can really be very beneficial for the consultant doing the work as well. So that was probably too long, but there's just a very brief overview, as brief as I get. I'm a kind of wordy person on, on the graduate writing programming in my center. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
And as it turns over, let me just step in and say lots of kudos in the chat. So you might want to check that out, Marilee, but also a request that you might share those slides. So
absolutely. I can absolutely share those things.
We will be happy to share our slides. And I know that the IWCA webinar webpage is collecting materials, and we'll make sure that all of this is available there for people afterwards. Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much, Marilee. My name is Kate Edgerton, and I am a writing coach at the Graduate Writing Center at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. I work for the government, and the views expressed in this presentation are mine and not theirs, and not the Department of the Navy's. And I'm a contractor. I have to say that, it's part of my job. I am not the director of this center. I am one of the full-time staff professionals who staffs our center. Because we are a very specific kind of institution, we have no student employees at all. But we're really excited to be here. We have been founded since, we were founded in 2013. We had 83 student interactions in the first quarter, and we have grown enormously, and we're really pleased to serve our student body. Our students are mostly mid-career military officers or civilian government professionals. The United States government is the client at our institution. That's the way our students come. They all are going to return to the fleet, the force, often federal service, after they leave. They are on extremely tight schedules. They are sent to us for X number of quarters, depending on their program. And there is incredible pressure for them to perform and perform highly and perform on time. So it is not a particularly relaxed environment. On the other hand, it's shore duty time for everybody, and at least they're not deployed. That makes a difference. Almost all of our students are at the master's level. We have a few students doing certificates. We have a few doctoral students doing dissertations, but most students are doing master's level coursework and master's theses. And about 10% of our students are international, generally officers from allied and partner governments who have been sent to Monterey to do a degree program with us and to collaborate with their American peers. We've been really pleased at the growth of our center over time. As I said, we were founded in 2013, and we every year are trying to get higher percentages of the total student body to use our services, to attend workshops, to attend one-on-one sessions, which, as Marilee said, is the heart and soul of what we do. We've also been really pushing and getting very good responses to work with the students who are most likely to see their work have a large audience off of our campus. We serve a higher percentage of the award winners at graduation every quarter than we do the general student body. And we are working hard to increase ways to support those students who want to publish in peer-reviewed journals, publish in trade journals, whose work is going to be widely read off of our campus. And we want to support those writers as best we can. Like Marilee's Center, we're doing a variety of things to work with graduate students. We are all professional staff. There are about 13 positions. We have 2 part-time folks who sort of share one of those jobs, but most of us are full-time salaried professionals. We do one-on-one coaching sessions. We're approaching about 6,000 meetings per year. We deliver more than 40 workshops every quarter. I really liked Marilee's list of workshops and the emphasis in part on autonomy. And in graduate school, you can be in control of parts of your life. That's a really interesting conversation for us to have with our military students who are coming out of very different kinds of hierarchies. And one thing that happens about the Writing Center at the Naval Postgraduate School is we are out of their chain. We're not in the chain of command. We're not giving them grades. We're not writing what the military people call fit reps, their sort of annual evaluations that run their life. We're a safe space. And so talking about things like, how are you managing? And what are your kids up to this week? And are you in fact getting any sleep? Because I'm not sure. We have a lot of those conversations in the Writing Center, whether in person or on Zoom. And I like the idea of having kind of a self-care workshop. That would be interesting to look at in our setting. We do tailored classroom visits, which are often adaptations of our workshop designed for a particular curricula or particular department. I teach technical writing workshops, and if I go into meteorology to work with their thesis students, I will bring all meteorology examples, and then physics, for example, and other things. Maybe probably about half of our students are working in science and engineering fields, but we also have a large school of defense management and international graduate studies, regional studies, policy studies. And I teach some writing courses in the National Security Affairs Department and the Defense Analysis Department, where students are doing a lot of graduate level social science writing. Additional things that we're looking at when we're talking about, well, what we serve graduate students all the time, but where do we want to grow? And our constraints here are about resources and hours, right? And having the bodies to run these kinds of programs and do this kind of outreach. We have been trying for the last year to start a write-in program. COVID happened. We haven't tried to launch that program in a Zoom environment. Our students are doing synchronous Zoom classes, and everybody is kind of dying from too much Zoom at our campus. But we're trying to figure out, is there a way now with some perhaps opening of restrictions next quarter starting in January, could we find spaces inside, outside? We're in sunny Central California. We can be outside in the winter. Could we do write-ins in a way that was safe there? And also our students are really struggling about not having enough social contact with each other and that sort of time. We want to increase our efforts to help students publish and have their writing be visible and have impact off campus. We want to help more academic departments assess student writing growth over time. There is no English department at my institution. There is no sort of humanities center, nobody who does that as part of their research. We are the only ones. But there's a lot of interest, of course, about assessment and other things. And the Navy's very interested in metrics where we can prove our value. We're also looking long-term at creating and delivering some pre-arrival refresher content in reading and writing and critical thinking skills. Our students have been out of academia mostly for somewhere on average between 8 and 10 years before they come back to us. They've been very busy, focused on other issues, not school. Occasionally we have folks who've been out as long as 20 years. Occasionally we have students who graduated from the Naval Academy 6 weeks ago and are coming to us first before they go to pilot training. That's the range of students we get at our institution. And we're also thinking all the time about new writing across the curriculum initiatives, what the Writing Center can do to pair and partner with departments to help departmental faculty, subject matter expert faculty, help students build specific skills about writing in their disciplines. So those are all things that are important to us. Okay, thanks very much. I think the next thing we want to do is, as Marilee said, is invite people to spend a minute thinking about what are a couple of things your institution, your center, your environment does to support graduate writers, and then what's something that you're interested in learning more about. And as we're asking you to do that, we will be getting ready to move people into breakout rooms for some conversation. And I think we're planning, let's see how we're doing on time here. I think we're planning on maybe 12, 15 minutes for conversation. And then we're going to want to hear from groups about what people were most interested in and what the most interesting ideas were, what kind of information people are asking for. Does that sound right, folks? Are we good? Okay. So take a minute to make some notes. It's always good to write when you're talking about writing. And Denise is going to set up breakout rooms for us. And I'm sure Marilee and I will be in rooms and happy to join those. And interested to hear about your centers and how you serve graduate students and what your goals are and how we can help.
I do just want to quickly jump in and say that the recording will be paused here. So please feel free to engage in open and honest conversation in your discussion groups, and look forward to speaking with all of you.
Great. Well, we certainly had some very interesting discussions in our group, and I'll let our group participate here in a minute, but can we get a few reports out about what kind of topics were most in demand? And go ahead and use the hand raising tool and we will call on folks. Tamar?
Hi, so thank you so very much for offering this. It's very nice to see people who also work in writing centers. I'll start with saying that I work at the Writing Center at Cornell. I'm a graduate consultant there, so I have the perspective of both being a graduate student and a consultant. We spoke a little bit about the different things that we are doing, but also about the makeup of the students who do come to get help, whether they're in the social sciences, hard sciences, international students, what they are, and also about the specificity of the content that they're looking for example, and mostly in workshops. Mm-hmm. And there was also a very good point being made about the fact of whether they really want workshops or they want a presentation. So how much hands-on of an experience is it really? Yeah, that's some of the things that we've discussed.
Terrific. Can we get a few other volunteers to illuminate what the groups are doing? Or Marilee, you want to jump in?
I can say we also talked about workshops a little bit in our group and getting people to attend. And so this notion of people want us to offer these types of things, but then oftentimes don't take advantage of the program. So probably a widespread issue. I feel like I've had this conversation with many writing center directors across the years, but that kind of thing about, do we provide the programming that like looks good publicly, but doesn't actually attract very many people? Or do we provide that programming that might serve fewer people in theory, but actually more people benefit from it because they take advantage of it, such as more one-to-one consulting or more writing groups or things of that nature?
Mhm. Our center has certainly experienced an increase in workshop participation in Zoom. We were the first quarter that we were doing what in our military context we call COVID ops. We did not try to do online workshops, and we have some of our workshops recorded as a way to make them available 24/7 for distance with, variable. We've tried over time to get the best recordings we can, but they've always been just recorded versions of live presented workshops, and those can be pretty variable. Last quarter, we did Zoom workshops for students to sign up and participate via Zoom, and we had really impressive numbers. Our numbers went up, and we had a lot of uptake. But tomorrow, our center always is dealing with that same question of, well, if they want to come to a workshop or a presentation, and how do we encourage presentations? I mean, how do we encourage interactivity? How do we encourage students to collaborate and work in the middle of the workshop? How do we market those so that it's clear what people are obliging themselves to attend when they sign up? And that can be a point of difference of opinion in some interesting ways. But I really like the range of workshop topics that Marilee talked about at the very beginning. And we are constantly sort of on the lookout for what kinds of workshops will best meet student demand, and when do we bring those into courses as opposed to offering them for an interdisciplinary community. Other people want, Tamar, come back?
I think that we also have we only work with graduate students, so it's 100% graduate students. Some of them are master's students, some of them are professional, but mostly PhD students. We did see an increase in asynchronous meetings. So they would send stuff in, we would send written feedback. Sometimes it doesn't work as good, as well, because sometimes you do need that conversation to get going. It is not just about the grammar, it is not just about the sentence structure. What we had at the beginning of the pandemic, so at the middle of the pandemic, but in the summer, we had a very successful program. About 120 students committed to a month-long program. We had on Mondays, we had a meeting that everyone had to attend. And then during the week, we had write-ins. And the write-ins were facilitated by me and by two other facilitators. And we had meetings. So we had write-ins, so 2 hours of writing, broken apart to full Pomodori, so the Pomodoro technique, doing it together, but also that were not obligatory. So they only had to come to the Monday meeting, in which we had a little bit of a presentation about different topics and a discussion about the weekly writing. And 120 people committed, and we had another 120 people on the waiting list, and we wrote maybe 5-6 emails emphasizing that it is not a writing class, that it is not we will not teach you grammar, we will not do this, we will not do that. And people in the first week were like, oh, but I thought this was something else. And so, but we wrote 100 times, and there are 100 people on the waiting list. Why? So it is indeed a struggle. And I don't know how it is for you. For us, they don't get penalized for not attending one-on-one sessions. I know that in Syracuse they do. So that's interesting. Something to consider.
We have a very low rate of no-shows. Our students are free to cancel if they have changing appointments. And I think our policy is if a student has missed a couple of appointments, then we ask them to, go essentially explain to the director why they have been using our resources and not coming. But it's a very low rate on our campus. And I am not, as a workshop presenter, I have had, in the Zoom context, I think I've had equal or better people showing up if they made a reservation for the workshop than if we were in person. But again, we have a very diligent student body at our institution. But I'd like to hear from a couple of other people if, and we've got some interesting comments coming in the chat about how COVID and teaching online and other situations have influenced whether people are coming for more Writing Center programming or are overwhelmed in some cases and maybe coming for less. But other people want to bring up other points of conversation. Gigi?
Thank you, Kate. I know I'm in your group, but I wanted to share.
Oh, great. Go for it.
I wanted to respond to Tamar's point with something that we do for our dissertation boot camps. When people register, I send an email that says boot camp information, please confirm. And it tells them everything to expect. And then down at the bottom, if this sounds good to you, please reply to confirm your participation. And most people reply and they know what to expect. Only once, and it happened just last week, somebody wrote back to say, you know, the email is this long, and she wrote back to say, could you just say something about what to expect next week? So, that tells me where you are. But I also wanted to say that we have had great participation by Zoom, and students have told us that it's a lot easier to participate in things because they don't have to go somewhere or they don't have to get out of somewhere. Like I work with a lot of students in the sciences who can't leave their labs, but they can open their laptop and they can come to a workshop. And so it's been a good transition for us. One of the things that we were talking about in our group is how to increase the services available to graduate students when you're in an Writing Center that serves undergraduate students as its primary population, and both Holly and I are in that situation. And so there's been a lot of experimentation, but critically documenting need and documenting demand has helped us make funding arguments to the graduate school. And so that's been great for us.
Thank you. Other people want to either ask questions or offer additional insights from their earlier conversation? Or what are the priorities at your particular center? What are you trying to do? Maybe somebody else here has experience and can chime in and help.
I was explaining or telling our group that we've seen some really good participation in our graduate writing groups through Microsoft Teams. The attendance has been better using Microsoft Teams this semester than when we were able to do in person last year. So who knows, that maybe it's they like the fact that they can stay at home and log in and do, you know, work from home, but we have been quite pleased with that.
Andrew, are your students using Teams also to share files, share materials, other things, or is it just the group conferencing and the ability to participate in a group from wherever they are?
No, they can share materials and things like that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of Teams uptake on our campus for certain activities. We are largely teaching in the government version of Zoom at this point, but then there are, you know, different interface pluses and minuses on both sides. But I know Teams is evolving very quickly as Microsoft is trying to meet the need of the current situation.
I had a question, not sure for the presenters or for anybody, but as a center who maybe would like to grow a writing group structure, what were some of y'all's processes and how long does it take to kind of build, get buy-in, and then find out a structure that works for your context? Maybe what were some of your processes as you developed your writing group programming?
Marilee, do you want to take that one or do we want to go back to Gigi? Because I think you both have experience.
Either way.
Okay. Gigi, you want to go first?
I was just about to say, Marilee, why don't you go ahead and go first?
All right.
I think it's a really good question. I think this is harder than it should be. It just is. And a lot of it is like building confidence in the consultants that you're working with that they can do this work and how it's not really that different than running one-to-one sessions. And so like that's a big piece of it. And then if it's, if you want to have funding lines that are different than how you normally pay your student employees, then that's another layer. But I think a lot of it, you could just continue, if they're already your employee, to pay them hourly. So that's kind of a separate issue. But in terms of just getting folks to know what you mean by the programming and then feel confident and feel like they can do it, because you don't really want to, be the one doing it. So it's like creating a program that they feel confident in, they feel like they can pursue, and they can support other grad consultants in facilitating the program. So that's the hardest part, is finding someone who's enthusiastic about it, and not just like, oh, I guess I need a project, so I'll do this thing you want me to do, but like really like, yes. And I think after that it gets a little bit easier, but it can be daunting, and then people don't want to disappoint you. So sometimes they won't tell you when they have concerns and questions, just like any project when you're working with students. So that's been the trickiest thing for me, is doing that, and then having things move on a timeline that my timeline. So kind of, tempering my expectations there. So I would say it takes a few semesters to get that ironed out. And then once the structure is there, I think it's a lot easier for somebody to come in and take it over, because they can train with that person for a few weeks or for a full semester even. They probably already facilitated a group, even if they haven't coordinated it. So then they can have a good sense of bigger and bigger pieces of the picture. So it's just those first couple semesters, 2 years maybe, to get things really solidified, in my experience.
Mhm.
So for us, we have full-time staff who facilitate the writing groups as part of my job. In fact, it's the favorite part of my job, because I get to meet the entire campus and get exposure to all of the intellectual work that's happening all across this fabulous institution. Our challenge has been getting writers to jump in and participate for a couple of reasons. One, there is just that standard fear that especially early career graduate students have, like, I'm too embarrassed to share anything that I have, or what I have is not going to be as good as what anybody else has, so I better keep it to myself. Or I haven't written it well enough to share it publicly. It's just not ready to go. So we have recruited in a couple of ways. One, first of all, I should say that my writing groups are only for the international student population. I would like for that to be different, but for right now, it's not. So we go to the international student orientations and make a pitch at that time. So we have a bit of a captive audience where we explain, this is what happens in a writing group and this is what it is. But even though I say it is really a conversation about anything about the writing, it often takes a couple of meetings for me to convince people, no, really, this is not just a little mini class with Gigi giving the grammar lecture. That's not what's happening here. But once they're into it, then they will stay for years. I've had several groups that have gone from the first semester to walking with their PhDs. So I average 15 to 20 groups per semester, which is fantastic. I also recruit by getting in contact with librarians, because the students go to the librarians when they're having writing trouble or trouble finding sources or whatever. So I make sure the librarians know what we do, and they make a lot of referrals. But I also ask students permission to send an end of semester kudos card. It's not a report card. It's your student has really taken the initiative to do this wonderful thing, to make sure that the advisor and the faculty know about it, so they can tell their friends and they'll tell their friends. And so I've gotten referrals that way. So that's the way we've slowly built it over time, from maybe 3 groups in the first semester to a record of 25. We're a little bit down right now, but it's working in Zoom. It's worked really well. They're coming together, and I think it's saving a lot of them, because they're seeing people that they have a relationship with. Even if it's Zoom, it's still community for them. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them too.
I love that kudos code idea, card idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. I think that's a nice way to just kind of like point out something lovely about, your students' experience.
Yeah, I mean, especially
Sandra?
for, go ahead.
Sorry.
Gigi, do you get permission from the students to contact their advisors?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I also, Gigi's point made me think of something else, around student expectations in the groups. And so we always talk about different kinds of writing support. So similar to that workshop on mentoring networks, so let's talk about like, you can come into the center to get one-to-one support, or you can create a different writing group that operates differently and has different types of feedback, or you can come to write on site programming and just get writing done. Because a lot of times people don't really engage around the part where they support other people. Like some people only come the weeks where they get their own writing talked about. So we have to have like a little chat, like this is a community. And maybe this isn't the best program for you. Maybe this isn't the way you want to engage, so that's definitely something we've experienced as well with either getting like addressing misconceptions and then people are, on board and excited about it, or they're like, no, never mind, that's not for me.
Right. But I think it's important. I really like that kudos card idea too, but Gigi is talking about this larger need to let the campus community, the other faculty, the other staff, the other participants, who are going to interact with these students, need awareness of what kind of services the Writing Center is able to provide and needs to help send the message to the students that this is a good thing to do. I said in my initial introduction that one of the things my center tracks and is very careful about is tracking the number of award-winning graduate students we work with, and that percentage is significantly higher than the general student body. We're trying to create this idea that this is where we come in part because you want to excel. That message goes very well on our campus. But talking to advisors and having advisors be aware of, oh, this very successful student or this student who made great strides in this particular term was taking advantage of this kind of experience, and then hoping that the faculty will send additional students our way, in part because they see the growth, they see the output, and in part because, at our campus, we're always thinking, we would like you to spend, your time on the subject matter expertise that the writing coaches don't have. Let us bring our expertise to your writers on these other issues about, process and craft and those issues, and talk about that community campus collaboration and getting, but I really like that idea. Sandy and I might have to steal that.
Thank you so much for all being here today. We just have a couple minutes left. Are there any like final thoughts, or maybe we have time for one more question? Tamara?
So I think that what Kate just said is that there's a need for acknowledgement, but also the acknowledgement of the students of how much work they're putting into it, but also acknowledgement of the work that the Writing Center is doing. And somehow attaching that together, I think that we're onto something in terms of collaborating with the entire university. And just thank you for the opportunity to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing us together today. This has been wonderfully inspiring.
Many thank yous coming through the chat as people exit. Well done.
So much for being here, Mary-Lee and Kate. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise and engaging us in such a robust conversation. And thank you all for contributing and for being here. And I learned so much from all of you. And I know from all the comments, many of us feel the same way. So thank you again. This recording, as well as the chat and the resources that we shared, will be available through the website and through the IWCA YouTube channel. So you'll be able to access those there. And thank you again for being here.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. It's great to see you.
Everyone.
Sorry, just one question.
Mhm.
I was confused with the time. Would you be able to upload the session on our website so I can see it later? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Great. Absolutely.
Apologies. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.